With a lot of my career in life, I just kind of fall into situations. And cartooning was kind of the same way. It can be something as simple as reading an article in a magazine, and one word can launch into a dozen different visuals. But if you always try to focus on that positivity and realize that you have that target on the front that you want people to see and you want people to follow, and you want to be that inspiration in their life, all I'm doing is giving you a catalyst for conversation. And I love it when I get to see posts like this or people share. The magazine's open at the kitchen table and everyone's talking about it. But I said yes. And the benefits of what that has brought back to me, and maybe something I've touched someone else's life, has been immense.
Welcome to Respond to Resilience, along with my co-host Bonnie Rumley, LCSW EMT. I'm David Dashinger. In this episode, we'll be speaking with Paul Combs. He's a fine artist, illustrator, cartoonist, and firefighter EMT. And we'll be speaking about firefighting, leadership, cartoons, and the art of making a difference. We invite you to like and subscribe. Our YouTube channel is Respond to Resilience. We're on Facebook, Respond to Wellness Inc., and Responder TV. LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and go to our website, respondertv.com, for past episodes and guest information. This episode is made possible by Strobes & Moore, a New England-based leading distributor, installer, and servicer of emergency vehicle equipment. Visit strobesandmore.com to sign up for special offers and receive 10% off your next order. This episode is made possible by the First Responder Center for Excellence. Discover more at firstrespondercenter.org and connect with us on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We'll be right back to speak with Paul after this.
In this family, more of us die by our own hands than by the hazards of the job.
In this family, up to a quarter of 911 telecommunicators have symptoms of post-traumatic stress.
In this family, our mental health and wellness are in crisis,
while responders are quietly suffering.
In this family, many struggle with job-related stress,
burnout, trauma, sleep disruptions, substance abuse,
and relationship problems.
In this family, we can help the helpers.
with vital information and resources,
resilient strategies,
and success stories of overcoming the obstacles.
In this family, no one is alone.
Welcome to Respond to Resilience with co-hosts retired Lieutenant David Dashinger, Dr. Stacy Raymond, and Bonnie Rumley, LCSW EMTB. We're very pleased to welcome Paul Combs to Respond to Resilience. Paul is the editorial cartoonist for Fire Engineering magazine and the author of 4 books and illustrator of the best-selling Sprinkles the Fire Dog and Sprinkles the Fire Dog 2, Making a Difference. Paul's a fine artist, illustrator, cartoonist, and firefighter EMT, and his work is published worldwide in newspapers, magazines, and books. Paul joined the fire service in 1995, and he's been a fire service instructor since 2000. He's now a retired lieutenant from the City of Bryan Fire Department in Ohio. He's also an FDIC presenter, keynoter, and hands-on training instructor, and a lot more. Paul, welcome to Respond to Resilience.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you, Paul. I'm listening to your list and wondering what you haven't done.
I left a few things out too.
No, it's incredible, and David and I are really happy and humbled to have you here with us. So really can't wait to. Oh, anytime. Well, we're really excited just to get into your situation now and your past, and how did you learn how to meld your love for art with the fire service, with your career?
You know, being an artist was never a question of what I was going to do. I mean, since I've been able to hold a crayon, I've been an artist. I drew my first comic book when I was 6 years old. So, you know, that love of art has always been there. I fell into firefighting by mistake. I was actually helping a buddy move a door from his uncle's house, who was a retired firefighter. And like any firefighter, he had a lot of tchotchkes on the wall and awards and everything. And I just asked the simple question of, what's it like to be a fireman? And 4 hours later, he had talked me into being one. And from the moment I walked into a firehouse, I knew that's where that was home. It was everything. I mean, as an artist, we're sponges. We soak in everything around us. From everything from the sights, the sounds, the smells of a firehouse, it felt like home from the minute I walked in. So, you know, even though the art career has always been there and it continues, the fire service just kind of happened by a happen chance. And it was one of those love at first sight kind of things. But you know, it was funny that I dabbled again. I'm fine art trained. I didn't get into cartooning until around 2004. So I was doing very serious, very museum type quality artwork. And so that was kind of the first things I dabbled in with the fire service, is cute little puppy dogs and helmets, and you know, a lot of Dick Kramer type work. But he was one of the bigger artists of the time. You know, so he was one of the first people that I kind of looked up to in that field. So I was doing a lot of work like that. And with a lot of my career in life, things just kind of fall into situations. And cartooning was kind of the same way. I was working with an ad agency who wanted me to do an editorial cartoon as a gag against another ad agency in Toledo, Ohio. And in the process of researching what editorial cartoons were, which is a lot of political, I fell in love with that craft. Because what I realized was, with fine art, if I am commissioned to do a portrait of someone, and you commission that same portrait for 10 different artists, you're going to get 10 pretty close representations of that face. You do that with cartoonists, it's all over the board. And I fell in love with the spontaneity of what that craft is. And so just in the research of doing that, I fell in love with editorial cartooning, and I had already kind of followed politics. And 6 months later, I find myself as the staff editorial cartoonist at the Tampa Tribune. And then syndicated with Tribune Media Services out of Chicago, and all that was kind of a skyrocket ride. But what I didn't realize was that moving to Florida, I was out of the fire service. And I never realized how much I needed that in my life. So I would go up to one of the firehouses after work every day, and I would stop by and have coffee with the guys. And they brought me in, you know, and we would always talk. And I would always ask how do you fight fires in the heat of Florida? And they couldn't understand how we fight fires in the cold of the Great Lakes. You know, and so those conversations were always started. But it kind of let me feel that I was a little bit at home. So the Fire Act was really big news at the time. And I did an editorial political cartoon on the Fire Act, and I took it to my editor at the Tampa Tribune, and she agreed to publish it, knowing that my history in the fire service. That afternoon, just by chance, I ran it by the editors of firehouse.com. And by that night, I had a contract to do cartoons on a regular basis. And my wife thought I was insane. I came out of my little office there, and I did a little happy dance in the living room, I think, you know. And because to me, I was back in the fire service, at least somehow. But that's how the cartooning in the fire service started. Again, everything is just kind of that spontaneous combustion of, you know, I'm going to try something, I do it, boom, let's go after it, you know.
Isn't it interesting how we have our plans in our life? We think we know what direction we're going in, and then everything just changes. And I'm a firm believer in what's meant to be for us is going to happen. You know, it's similarly, I felt that way when David asked me to do a podcast. I thought, well, I've never done one. I don't know what to do, but I'm happy to learn and wing it. So, you know, if you had asked me 5 years ago, will we be doing this? No. Right. So sometimes you get these interesting turns where you can use a part of yourself in another way that you really didn't know. And when you talk about your story, that makes me feel like that's what's happened to you.
Yeah. Well, even though that, you know, art has always been a part of my life, I just knew I was going to be a rock star until I was 30. You know, that was my goal. I was going to be in bands, and I was, you know, so
what's your instrument, Paul?
Guitar and bass. Yeah.
Neat.
That's great.
Yeah, I've been playing music has been in my family since I was young. I actually learned how to play guitar on my grandfather's old Harmony Rocket. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with those, but it's just a beautiful old hollow body guitar. You know, so, and I still have that guitar.
Wow.
So that journey has always kind of been there, and it's more of a hobby these days. But I just knew until I was 30 that I was going to be a rock star. And I got into the fire service late. I didn't get into the fire service till I was 29.
Right.
And then that's when the whole focus was, okay, the rock star thing, not going to happen. Let's do the firefighting thing.
But I have found parallels between being in a band and being on a fire scene. We could go into it another time, but I saw these parallels. You know, like a jam, right? You show up with a bunch of guys never played together before necessarily, but you do have a book of chord charts or something, just like firefighters have SOPs and, training that's pretty standardized, and show up and, get either make music or get the fire put out. And, it's just a fun there's a certain kind of improvisational, I guess, aspect to music and firefighting too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So,
and then, just like that, you end up with those scenes.
Right.
For me, it was a bar. And I know this is going off script a little bit here, but honestly, It was right out of a scene of the Blues Brothers. The last time I played live was we went to a bar, and it was called the Wildcat Bar in Kentucky. And I don't even think it's still there anymore. But we pull up, and the sign out front said "Cold beer, bust ye teeth." Now that's what they were, their marquee. So we should have known. That should have been the sign. We walk in, and literally the stage is covered in chicken fence wire.
Wow.
And I mean,
so they really do throw bottles at the band.
Oh, we didn't get bottles thrown at us, but oh my gosh, it was one of those where it was like halfway through that set, I'm like, this is not for me.
Yeah, music can be a humbling avocation sometimes. Yes. In the world of emergency response, every moment counts. That's why you need equipment you can trust. Strobes & More is here to ensure you're always ready to respond. Born and bred in the USA with 30 years of experience, Strobes & More is a New England-based leading distributor, installer, and servicer of emergency vehicle equipment. From police to fire, EMS to public works, we've got you covered. We partner with top manufacturers like Wayland, ProGuard, Sound Off Signal, Havas, Federal Signal, and many more. We offer a robust inventory of over 2,000 SKUs from 40-plus brands, guaranteeing you'll find what you need. Our online store is easy to use, and with nationwide distribution, you'll get our products within 48 hours wherever you are. For local agencies in Rhode Island and Connecticut, our specialized installation services deliver an unmatched upfitting experience. We do the hard work so you can focus on saving lives. Join our dealer network for preferred pricing and exclusive benefits. Discover why Strobes & More is the trusted name in emergency vehicle equipment. Visit strobesandmore.com to sign up for special offers and receive 10% off your next order. Speaking of creative processes, and this is something I'm fascinated with, in my world of creating music and video, but in your world, can you share a little bit about your creative process, like kind of where the inspiration comes from, and then how does it actually translate onto paper with a finished illustration or cartoon?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, artists, I think by nature, we're sponges. We soak in a lot around us, and it can be a big pain in the butt at sometimes, but because it's not a switch you can turn on and off when you want it. Right. But we soak in a lot. So to me, it can be something as simple as reading an article in a magazine, and one word can launch into a dozen different visuals. Same thing with listening to podcasts, being in a class, just being around the guys at the firehouse was a big inspiration. But to me, I have 4 volumes of these books, and they are filled with thumbnails. And this is how I take notes, even if I'm sitting in a class. Rarely will you see me taking line text. I'll be sketching out little thumbnails like this. Every cartoon I've drawn has come from one of these thumbnails. And a lot of it, that is how I stay mentally healthy in a way that I have to get that stuff out when it's in there. I keep a small sketch pad by my bed at night, because if something hits me at 3 a.m, it will drive me insane until I can get it out. So even if I just reach over in the middle of the night in the dark and scribble something down, it allows me to at least function as a normal human being, get some sleep. So I carry this book with me everywhere we go. My wife has learned that it's an extra appendage, that it goes with us on dates no matter where we go, because again, I have to be able to function as a normal human being. And
that's so
again,
cool.
I cannot turn that on and off. So my creative process starts with these little thumbnails. And that's whether it's a cartoon, an illustration, or a piece of fine art. And then from there, once I know that, and sometimes the thought comes before the visual and vice versa. And I will go back. I've got these dating back to 2004, and I will go back through these volumes at times, and I will see a visual that actually matches a topic today.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then I can put that together, and create a cartoon. So that's a lot of how that starts. And we can share some visuals later if you like on the whole creative process of it. Starts with that thumbnail, then it goes to a little bit bigger where I'd actually sketch it out. I still love that old school feel of pen on paper. So I still hand draw a lot of the cartoons I do, even though now they're all painted digitally.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So it's kind of that combination of traditional and tech, and technology. But that's kind of where it goes. And there's a lot of ingredients that go into that soup, but that's kind of the gist of the creative process.
Wow, incredible.
Are you familiar with Dan Sundall's work in Canada?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
he does amazing work.
He does. I mean, you both are, to me, on the same vein. And when we had him on the podcast, he was describing that catharsis, that therapeutic process that he has in getting the images out of his mind onto the paper. And you just said that. And, as a therapist, we try to get first responders to get their thoughts and feelings out in any way possible, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they classically think, well, I have to tell someone, but I encourage journaling or music or instrument playing or even art. And so I like the fact that you're making this feel tangible to your average person. It doesn't have to be this beautiful framed piece that we're familiar with seeing when we think of art. It can be a journal that you just, if you don't have the words for a situation, you can capture it that way. And I really think it's important for our viewers and listeners to hear that it can just be something so simple like that.
Yeah. And, and I'm not a therapist. I mean, I didn't even stay in on Holiday Inn Express last night, so I can't even pretend to know what I'm talking about in that field. But that is advice that I've given a lot of people. I actually have one of these books that I keep that my family knows to never look in.
Okay.
That is my release. There are images in there that they will never want to see.
Right.
But I am blessed to be able to have that ability to visualize that and to get it out, to purge it in some way. And I think the biggest aspect of that is to recognize it and name it.
Right.
I don't try to hide it. I don't try to push it away. I don't try to stick it in a box and put it in a closet. Mm-hmm. I actually recognize that is something that's bothering me, and I can put that down in something, get it out, recognize it, close the cover. I know it's there. It will always be there. And so I've actually recommended that to a few people that have been struggling. And it doesn't have to be visual. Again, It can be like a journaling, something that you just write down, something that you don't have to share with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's incredible because you're taking it out of your brain, and the act of putting it somewhere on paper, it takes it outside and makes it external. So there's a degree of separation now. So I think that's wonderful advice you're giving people.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're in this field long enough, and that is with firefighting, police, EMT, nursing, whatever it may be, you're going to see things over that career. They're going to be things that, and I always frame it like this, that, we all have ghosts. I have been very fortunate, and maybe it is because I have that ability to visualize things and kind of get them out of my system. Mm-hmm. But my ghosts are present, but they never haunt me. And I'm fortunate in that sense. Yeah. That, I could be, I did a cartoon on this, and I was sitting in a airport in Toronto, and I had a layover, and like a lot of firefighters, I'll wear a job shirt or something when I travel.
Sure.
And he just like, oh my God, you're a firefighter, and he asked the one question I think we all hate: what's the worst thing you've ever seen? Now, he says this out of, and I say ignorance, but he doesn't know. It's just out of morbid curiosity to him. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't know what type of ghost that stirs up. And the moment he asked, and I did the polite thing, I was like, we see a lot of things, it's like, we don't want to talk about it. But from that instance, my ghost traveled with me the rest of that trip. Mm-hmm. Because now I'm immediately back to those calls.
Yeah.
But again, I've recognized my ghost. I know they're there. And again, I'm fortunate that they don't haunt me. And in 30 years of doing this, I can say fortunate. Right. But, that is always something in the back of my mind is when is something going to happen that's going to trigger another event like that? And that's where this little black book comes in handy for me. Is that it, even though it can be an idea, something funny, something, that we can teach a lesson with. Now I can do something that possibly could create a cartoon that maybe will help someone else.
Right. And
that's how I always kind of approach this.
Well, I'd love to jump from that thought because your cartoons are so relatable. And, I think there's amazing detail that probably only people in the fire service can appreciate. But you make certain aspects of it larger than life, and certainly your characters look larger than life. So it makes it powerful. And I think for people who are not readers per se, but who are visual people, it's such an accessible way to kind of hear what your message is. And I also realized when I was doing research and looking at a number of your cartoons, that it kind of had me looking at both sides of the situation, not just the side that I would tend to take. Do you have an agenda on what you want people to, or a vision of what you want people to take away from your art, or do you kind of leave it up to whatever their subjective experience is?
No, and I say this word loosely. There's a science to doing these type of cartoons. Just like, if you're reading a book, you're reading, a page a certain way, you're reading from top to bottom, left to right. There is thought that goes into how I want the viewer to read the cartoon. There are certain elements that I want you to see first that sets up what you're going to see last. Now, and all this happens within 10 seconds, but there's a method to the madness in the sense of how I want you to read the message. Now, I will say that, and it's funny that you bring up that seeing both sides, because that is the one thing that probably made me a bad political cartoonist when I was doing that sort of thing, is that no one wants a fair political cartoonist. And my wife calls me Boy Scout, because I do try to see things from different directions.
Yeah.
And even if it's hearing a story, reading an article, or meeting someone, or disagreeing with someone, I want to see, okay, why am I disagreeing with this person? How are they seeing life through their lens? So yeah, not something that's really sought after for political cartooning, but I think fits well with the fire service, because I don't want to get out there and I don't want to be that person just pointing fingers. I hope that, and again, I always claim that I'm not the sharpest crayon in the box. There are people out there far smarter than me. And I'm hoping they're figuring a lot of this out. All I'm doing is giving you a catalyst for conversation. I'm giving you a cartoon that, and I love it when I see posts like this, or people share that, the magazine's open and at the kitchen table and everyone's talking about it. Yeah. Or there are a couple of people that tape my cartoon over the urinal. Again, it's a silly thing, but it's one of those things that starts conversations. Right. It's one of those things that gets people thinking. And to me, that's the greatest compliment I can get about my work. So I do try to see things from different sides. I try to be as fair as I possibly can be. But at the end of the day, it's I hope when you read these, that you're not just looking at someone else, that it's a mirror and you're reflecting a little bit about what this is talking about. Yeah. My buddy Chief Rick Lasky, always talks about that. He'll see these and laugh, and an hour later he's driving down the road going, "Oh my God, he was talking about me." But that's I guess that's the power of what I'm doing, and what any cartoonist is doing. And it's just not me. It's not a vain thing that I'm saying here. Is that if we do our job correctly, we made our point within that 10 seconds. And my first editor at the Tampa Tribune, she was amazing. And she taught me a lot about how to approach things like a journalist. And she said, that a great cartoonist needs to be like a concert pianist. And she's like, you have to be able to hit all the emotions and all the notes. Because if you hit the same note, you play the same tune over and over and over, no one will pay attention. So you'll see cartoons come out that just have absolutely no point. They're silly to be silly. And a lot of times I will do that to kind of set up, because I know something as heavy is coming. And I call those the gut punches. Okay. There's no humor involved, but I want you to pay attention. Well, if all I'm doing is that type of heavy hitting, there's going to be a certain numbness that comes to it. And the message and what I'm trying to convey is not going to be as powerful.
As firefighters and first responders, we're brilliant at the basics. We master the art of stretching the line, and we excel at being there for those who need us most. Yet even the best of us can be caught off guard. We sometimes face unexpected challenges like injury, cancer, or post-traumatic stress symptoms. But you're not alone. The First Responder Center for Excellence is here to equip you with the tools and resources you need to stay informed and prepared. We help you focus on staying strong, safe, fit, and resilient. Optimize your performance with cutting-edge health, wellness, and science information, from fitness to nutrition, medical evaluations to behavioral health, cancer awareness to cardiac health. We've got you covered. Remember, we're stronger together. Discover more at firstrespondercenter.org and connect with us on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. The First Responder Center for Excellence. Equip yourself with excellence for every call.
I have several pieces in mind that speak to me, and I can put myself in that situation that you have on the page. I love the ticking time bomb in the ambulance. I love the firefighter with the anvil in the ocean, dragging him down. I think they are so tangible and so relatable, and putting my EMT brain on or David putting his fire brain on, they speak to us immediately. And, there's one in particular I want to ask you about, because we talk a lot about leadership on this show. And there is one that's titled Bullseye. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit particularly about that one and your vision behind it.
Yes. So that is the message behind that is to be the target. And that is actually the class that I teach now is be the target. And it's not as much about, because, and I've put this out on Facebook and Instagram different ones, and I don't put any words to it whatsoever.
Right.
And 90% of what I get back is I am the target of all this bad stuff. I am the target of what my chief is doing to me, what the union is doing to me, what all this stuff is. And the point I'm trying to make is that you want to be the target. You want to be the target for others to aspire to be. You want to make yourself that person that everyone else sees as the leader. And that being the target is a good thing. That there's a difference of having the target on the front as opposed to having the target on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that, again, seeing things from all sides, I love it. And it's one of the things I like about the class that I'm doing right now is that we talk about what being a leader is, but then we get into what are the pitfalls that you can get yourself into that will destroy everything that you've already built. And then what do we do as leaders to grow and go on? Because we always talk about, okay, yeah, this is how you become a leader. Well, what happens when you become that leader? Now what? What's the next step? So that's a lot about what that cartoon is representing, is being the target, is making that a positive thing instead of a negative.
That's so great, because there's so much emphasis on, getting up to the position, getting up to the point where you become that leader, but we don't really have a lot of training or resources to develop those leaders. So it's such a great class that you're running there.
Or the worst thing is you were promoted and left on your own.
Yeah.
We don't have a training academy for new officers. You may take a test, you may, pass this, all the litmus tests of everything you have to do to become a certain rank. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing of how you do conflict management. How do you talk to someone who is having marital issues at home? And these are all things when I became a lieutenant that I had to learn the hard way sometimes. And I wish I could go back and give different advice than I did at that time, because I just didn't know any better.
Right.
At least I had the foresight of, I had some good mentors of, if there's anything like that, don't do it in front of people, take them out to the front of the engine or someplace to get some privacy. But I wish I would have had some type of training to say, hey, this is how you handle yourself in these situations.
Absolutely. I'm totally in sync with that sentiment. Having retired, and I wish I had a time machine to go back and change some of the stuff that I did or didn't do. And it is still, I think, a large gap in the fire service that we need to fill. Yeah,
that goes right up to the chief officers as well. Mm-hmm. One of the complaints, I've been through at my firehouse, I've been through 3 chiefs, and each one of them, they had to learn how to communicate with elected officials, always evolving elected officials. Again, all these things, we do a horrible job of preparing people for these things.
I go let you go right, don't live it up, don't dance all night. I go let you go right, don't live it up, don't dance all night. I go let you go right, live it up, dance all night. 'Cause you can want anybody. Well, I guess you had no. You're mine.
You know, we are careful on the podcast and obviously in our therapy work, Stacy and I, to validate the feelings and to acknowledge the betrayals that people feel. But also, having been a past leader myself, a captain during COVID, it's lonely at the top, you know, and I think what you're saying, it's harder when you don't have the tools or the training to handle certain situations. I feel it helped me to be a therapist because I could rely on some of those skills. But I love how you describe the bullseye, because I do think a lot of people, and even myself, I found my brain going to the negative, but I think we could do that with everything. And it makes you take a pause and take a step back and reanalyze how you're looking at things, you know, even something as simple as a cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and it is so hard these days, whether it's in the firehouse or whether you're online, is to find anything that's, you know, some positivity in your life.
Right.
And that is so hard at times, is to seek out positivity and to try to cut out that negativity. I do it all the time with social media. There was a time when, you know, back probably between 2008 and 2015 or so, that's what you had to do. If you didn't have a big social media following, you know, you're somehow not producing, or it was something like that. And I have found over the years that it is far better to cut that out of your life, to unfriend people that are that negative influence, that are always that anchor dragging you down in some way or the other. And, you know, and unfortunately during political times, it's even easier, you know, to cut people out. But, you know, again, it's that constant pressure cooker of negativity that where you can in life, cut that out. And that helps you, because there are other things that you can't do. If you're a chief, you got elected officials, those people are in office until they're out of office, and you have to deal with whatever world that is. That is a negativity or positivity that you can't control sometimes. So why not put yourself in a position where you can better handle those things by cutting the ones that you can't out of your life? You know, you don't need that extra drag when you need that enthusiasm and that energy to be able to get you past those other times. Absolutely. You know, and I try to tell people that from time to time. And even with my cartoons, I mean, there are groups out there on Facebook dedicated to trashing everything that I do. And, you know, and I'm okay with that. Because you know what, they're still reading what I'm doing, and
you're still relevant.
Yeah, they are. And there are people that actually come to me saying, you know what, I am actually ashamed that I've been part of this group. And to me, that makes my day. That one person cut that negativity out of their life. You know, so, and it's hard. It's hard. There are days where I have to force myself to do the same thing. But if you always try to focus on that positivity and realize that you have that target on the front that you want people to see and you want people to follow, and you want to be that inspiration in their life, that helps you get through a lot of this.
Yeah, such an important point, and we've really never touched on it before. Just the fact that, you know, the visibility that we take on you as a very high-profile cartoonist in the fire service and in the, you know, in general, or someone who steps out of being on the line at the fire department under the radar, now they're stepping into a leadership position. Well, now you are now visible, and, you know, we don't think about it. Maybe that keeps some people, you know, from promoting because they don't want to be that visible, but it's kind of comes with the territory.
Well, you know, I'm a firm believer that the minute we walk into the firehouse doors, we have a limelight on us. Now that light changes throughout our careers. But even as a rookie, you walk in, you have a limelight on you. There is that spotlight, and people are seeing what you do. You know, and we are already making our judgments, and we're making our assessments of what type of firefighter you're going to become. And then you become that firefighter. My second chief always told me that, you know, you're not worth anything in the fire service till you've been in there for 5 years. And, you know, and I always like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And at 5 years, everything just kind of cleared up. The fog lifted. I was like, oh my God, he was right. You know, but even up to that time, the spotlight was on me. What type of firefighter am I going to become? You know, and that's when he even came to me as, well, I think you need to be an instructor, because I guess I had proven myself up to that point. You have that spotlight on you, and your actions are always being watched. So what are your actions and your words saying about you? You know, there is no hiding in the fire service.
Right. You're making a really great point. And I think that's another thing that people don't give leaders really that grace of understanding what it's like to be in the chief's role, right? Or to be the person who has to make all of those tough decisions. And like you said, they're sandwiched between all of the people they're in charge of, but then there's a whole host of players above them. And a lot of times people don't know who those players are and what the accountability level is. So I really like how you're bringing that point up, because it's something that we haven't really discussed. And that limelight is very important. And I think that it causes a unique pressure for our leaders. And it makes you wonder, you know, when there is a mistake or when something isn't handled the way everyone would have thought, you know, how does that pressure take its toll on a leader as well? Yeah. And I'm not condoning or saying that those people are allowed to betray their people, because they're not. But you could kind of understand in human behavior why someone in such a position of power could be under such pressure and how that might translate into life every day.
Yeah, and you know, and I would tell my crew that from time to time as well. Now, I only went as far as lieutenant, but I think anyone who goes up through the ranks understands what I'm getting ready to say, is that when you first come in, there is that pressure from above. You need to perform, you need to prove yourself, you need to do all these things, become certified. Then you promote up. And now not only do you have that pressure from above, now you got the pressure from below. Now I had 3 guys under my command, and they had certain expectations of me as their officer. So now I had that pressure coming up from that direction and the pressure from above. And as you grow through the ranks, that pressure from below becomes even greater. But I don't think the pressure from above ever really relinquishes that much, because it's just a different type of pressure. And one of the things that I would do with my crew is and the fire engine was the place where it was all, there were no limitations. My guys knew to call me lieutenant when we were in front of the public. I didn't care if they called me Paul any other time. But it was in the truck when the headsets are on, the doors, the windows are up, they could say whatever they wanted to say. The conversation could go wherever it wanted to go. And there were times where it was like, oh my God, the chief this or whatever. And that's where, again, I would step in and say, you know what, you have no idea the pressure he's under. These are some of the things that you don't know, or maybe you're not suspecting, because again, as a lieutenant, I never had the burden of an entire fire department under my command. I never had to be on the scene where I had our agency plus other agencies, and I had to make decisions that could have affected lives. I had a crew, so I could only imagine what that pressure must have been like. And so I was always trying to at least get my guys to look at it from that direction.
This episode is made possible by Strobes & Moore, a New England-based leading distributor, installer, and servicer of emergency vehicle equipment. Visit strobesandmore.com to sign up for special offers and receive 10% off your next order. This episode is made possible by the First Responder Center for Excellence. Discover more at firstrespondercenter.org and connect with us on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. Yeah, I love so much of what you're saying, and I can relate to a lot of it. And I think, my world, I used to think of it in terms of being part of the problem versus being part of the solution, right? The guys on the line, it's easy for us to complain, but are we really solving anything by doing that? Ultimately, it's good to get it out, but at some point, like, how can we make it better collectively? And I think that's something we can still improve on in the fire service. I just wanted to shift gears with you, Paul.
Sure.
And this is actually in the same vein, but let's talk about another one of your illustrations. What I think is incredible about it is it does list some common fire service issues, but also on the other side of the blackboard, it's got a list of solutions, and the common denominator is it's facilitated by coffee. So can you talk a little bit about creative problem solving in the firehouse and how this cartoon evolved?
The funny thing is, I was never a coffee drinker until I joined the fire service. And the first job you learned when you came into my firehouse is how to make a good pot of coffee. So that became the nucleus of everything that seemed to happen. Was when you came into the firehouse, first thing you did was got a pot of coffee. Hey, how you doing? How are the kids? What's going on in your life? Throughout the day, you would grab that pot of coffee. When we come in for training, you went for coffee. So that always kind of seemed to be the surrounding of where a lot of great conversations came from. And I realized how just important those conversations are in the firehouse when, again, I as an introvert, I don't say much. I kind of like to stay back in the scene a little bit and survey what's going on, listen to the conversations. I've already said more words than I'll probably say in a month here. But being able to listen and understand what's going on, and you see how, a simple problem can get 16 solutions, just by sitting around with a cup of coffee. Right. And so I wanted to do this cartoon that, there is power in that coffee cup, in that pot of coffee, but it's more about the communication and giving your people an area. Like I said, not all the guys on my department are coffee cup drinkers, but that time in the engine coming back from a scene was so valuable because it allowed them to say things that they couldn't say in the firehouse, or they couldn't say to the captains or the chiefs or whomever it may be. If I did something, it was game on. I had two different types of crews in my career. My first one was very training oriented, very serious. And my last group could have been, I couldn't have had more knuckleheads in one truck. And they were both great. They were amazing firefighters, but personality wise, it was night and day, and I had to let them have that opportunity to talk to me. Because at other times they couldn't do it. There were certain rules and regulations. And I wanted to let them know that was out the window. Whatever you have to say to each other or whatever that happens in this truck. So that became our coffee pot in a lot of ways. That, whether it be politics, personal life, whether they were trying to take a conversation and spiral it downward to the point where I would take my headset off, which was a win for them. But it built that team. It built the team that we had. And that was the coffee pot, because so much can be had when you let conversations happen and you don't judge people. You don't allow conversations to become contentious. And there's where that conflict resolution comes in, where you've got to be able to step in and say, okay, well, this is getting out of hand.
Right.
I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not busting heads. I'm saying, okay, well, let's pull this back to a respectable level. Because you know how it is, no matter whether it's in the firehouse or whether it could be online, one person starts raising a voice, gets a little bit more bass in that voice, and the next person has to go up. Same with being online, the blah, blah, blah. Whoever's the loudest is the person that's right. It's important to be able to pull that back and keep it contained as a leader. And I say leader not as that you have to have the bars on your collars. There's a lot of times where that leader is the new person in the firehouse, and they're the one making the common sense. There's a respectable way of coming with that. So that's where that cartoon really came from. And it has so many different directions other than the coffee pot. But the whole point of that was to get the conversation started of what does conversation mean? And what
I really love I just love the concept and the analogy of it, because we all know in this line of work that coffee pot means so many things.
Yeah.
Right? It's family, it's gathering, it's talking. So I love both the analogy and the reality of it. So it was a good vision that you had. You have some other interesting things out there that you've been working on. You have the Adam 12 Plymouth and Prince of Your Hot Rod edition. Can you talk a little bit about where you're going with all of those works?
I have no idea where it's going. That is one of those things that I'm just doing for fun. Okay. I'm a big history and heritage guy. I love doing that. And I've got a whole line, the Adam 12. Again, I love 70s TV shows for some reason. Just the era I grew up as a kid, it's just the fondness, so Emergency, Adam 12, Kojak, Starsky and Hutch. I always love those things. So this is one of those things I just kind of put out there. It's available as a print, but that's more of just, again, therapy in a sense for me. It's something totally different. I have to have a lot of different oars in the water to be happy. So that's just another avenue. It's kind of like I do the cartoons, but I don't know if you can see behind me. It's kind of hard to see, but I'm also working on a new fine art piece, which is something that I'm getting more back into after almost 25 years of doing cartoons. And reconnecting with that part of my artistic past because of the next venture we're doing, me and my wife. So I don't know if you want to get into any of that right now, or what the next chapter holds. But
yeah, that's actually one of our questions, and I do want to make sure we talk about your work with the USO. But let's talk about what's next for Paul Combs. What do you have up your sleeve?
Well, I mean, we're still doing the fire cartoons, and after Bobby Halton's passing, my new boss, David Rhodes, we're exploring new areas where maybe we can go with the cartoons. So that's kind of exciting, but I guess again, we were talking about just things that kind of just pop up in your life and hard left turns that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
I've always had my art studio in my house, and we've got this large 2-story colonial. And now that we're empty nesters, I've taken over more rooms than I thought I would. And it's got to the point to where I need more space as an artist to create all the things that I want to create. So I was just looking for a new studio. And I live in a town of 10,000 people up here in Northwest Ohio. And it's this Rockwellian town of, we just have this beautiful downtown square and, the whole iconic, Midwestern thing going on. And we've always had this old house here called Christmas Manor. And it was a house built in 1874, and it's been vacant for a few years. And my wife and I just started looking at it, and we ended up purchasing it 2 months ago. And a lot of work still needs to be done, but it's going to be my studio. But what we're doing is we're opening an art gallery.
Wow.
Something I never would have, if you'd have told me a year ago that I was going to have an art gallery, I wouldn't have believed you. But that's, and that's become kind of a new passion and a new direction for us, is learning how the business of that works and how to connect with other artists and learn that aspect of it. Because again, me as an introvert, I'm not the icebreaker types. I just can't go and just start conversations with people. So this in a lot of ways is making me step out of that comfort zone, a lot like public speaking does for me. Is it allows me not to get stagnant, to stretch out a little bit and learn new things. So this is a totally new thing. It makes absolutely no sense, and we're doing it anyway. But we're excited about it. It's this beautiful, iconic home. And
do you have a name for the gallery, or is it
Gallery 317?
Okay.
And my daughter's the one that came up with the number, because it is actually on 317 West Butler Street. But it is, and my daughter is in on this with us. So it is the three of us with one goal. And my studio has always been called Studio 7, which was my first badge number.
Oh.
So even though the address is 317, it has more of a meaning.
Congratulations, Paul.
Well, thank you. We're excited.
That's wonderful for you. And hopefully David and I will get to come out and visit it when you open one day.
Please do. Please do.
All right, another road trip.
There's always going to be coffee.
we have so many trips on the calendar, you have no idea. But that's great. Really happy for you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's exciting.
Before we forget, let's talk about your work with the USO. Tell us what you do, where you do it, and kind of what's involved in the the outreach part of all of it. I'm part of an organization called the National Cartoonist Society. And we have been involved with the USO that dates all the way back to World War II. In 2008, Jeff Bacon, who is a retired captain from the Navy, who draws cartoons for the Navy Times, reconnected that organization with the military and the USO. And they started taking cartoonists out and drawing for the troops. And the trip started off small. And by the time I got involved in 2010, we're going to Afghanistan, we're going to Iraq, we're going downrange. I found myself in military choppers. Again, you talk about things that you thought you would never do in your life. Right.
But the beauty of what we're doing is it is the only time that I personally do live caricature is when I'm on USO tours. And I always say the beauty of this is the USO sends a lot of entertainers out, and they put on concerts or whatever it may be. They do a lot of football players, sports personalities, and you may get a photograph with them, a handshake, and then you move on. The beauty of what we do is we get you for 15 or 20 minutes. People, there's usually 8 to 10 of us that go on tour at a time. So it's a first come, first serve. You come to your table, I'll do a caricature of you. But the beauty of that is I become your lifeline home for a while. And whether that means that we're in the military hospitals visiting the wounded, or we're out in a tent somewhere in Afghanistan, is that I've got you talking about your family. I've got you talking about sports, what your hobbies are back at home, all these things. And for that little brief time, I've got you somewhere other than the war zone you're in or the hospital you're in. It's a break from that mundane. Mm-hmm. So that's the beauty of what we get to do. And at the end, I give them the silly caricature of themselves, and it's something they can Skype home about for a while, but it's that lifeline that we bring. And I like to think a lot of it is the comfort that we bring when we're in the hospitals. Mm-hmm. I don't know how involved you want to get with stories here, but we've got plenty of the impact that we have. I know one was I was in Germany and we were at a hospital, and that was the first stop for a lot of soldiers coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan. And this soldier had been badly burned. And I was asked whether I wanted to go in. Of course, I'm going to go. They knew my background as a firefighter. They said, "Hey, you're perfect for this." Well, nothing can prepare you for that. Again, as a firefighter, you see things, but nothing really can prepare you for what war does to the human body. But I went in and I started a conversation with this young man, and I told him what I did, but I was like, I can draw a cartoon for your kids, whatever, And he goes, "No, I want you to draw a portrait of me." Now, he was badly burned in the face and upper torso. And I wasn't reluctant to do it, but I'm like, "Are you sure you want this?" And he was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Can you do it realistic?" I was like, "I can." And he goes, "I want you to draw me as realistic as you possibly can." Mm-hmm. So I did. And for 20 minutes, we talked, and he's telling me about his family and his kids, what life might be like when he gets home, all these things. And at the end, I asked him one more time if he wanted to see it. He did. And I showed it to him. He took a deep breath and just gave me a fist bump and said, "Thank you." He goes, "The nurses here," he goes, "I've been here for 2 weeks and the nurses wouldn't give me a mirror. This is the first time I've seen myself."
Oh.
And talk about a bomb being dropped on you. And other than the fact that I called him a certain name to his face, which in the military they appreciated, he understood. And I understood that that's what he needed. That was the therapy he needed. That was weighing on him, and he needed to see himself. We have lots of stories like that, even visiting some of the retirement homes and visiting the retired warriors that we have, the stories and the experiences. They always thank us for being there, but oh my gosh, I mean, the things we get and the appreciation we get for life when we come home. I hug my daughter a little bit tighter, when I would come home for those. Now, obviously, as the wars have drawn down, there's not as much of a need for us, which is a blessing too. Yeah. But my daughter was younger at the time, and you just get more of appreciation. And you travel the world, you see a lot of places that don't have the luxuries that we do in life. Yeah. So that is the benefit of, again, getting out of your box, experiencing new things. I always tell my daughter there is power in the word yes. It is not a comfortable thing to say, "Hey, you're going into a war zone." I'm a firefighter. Yeah, I see bad things, and we may do some dangerous things, but I never anybody shooting at me. Yeah, I had mortars fired at me, so there was some apprehension in saying yes, but I said yes, and the benefits of what that has brought back to me, and maybe something I've touched someone else's life, has been immense. Wow. And I always told my wife that there were things like keynoting FDIC. Not a comfortable thing for someone who likes to be in the back of the room with a sketchbook. But I never want my daughter or anyone else to think that I didn't have the courage to say yes to something that I was afraid to do. That so powerful. By taking the courage and making that commitment, and taking that deep breath and doing it anyway, you'd be amazed what life will bring you. Yeah. Kind of like buying a gallery and maybe being bankrupt in a year.
Well, Paul, what you just shared, it's incredible. And what's very inspiring about you is not just looking at your work, but in talking to you, I now have an understanding of who you are. And you're someone with endless possibility, and you keep your eyes open to the world for the potential in you and in others. And that's just so incredibly inspiring. And I know that our viewers and listeners will be inspired by you today, because I know that I am. And listening to that story, how you could connect with that soldier and give him what he needed in a way that maybe no one else could. It's why you were on that mission.
Yeah. Well, and and it's just not me. I mean, the other cartoonists we have, they connect in a different way. I mean, they don't all do caricature. Right. And some of them, they've been doing cartoons for a long time. or different comic strips or whatever, and they make that connection of, oh my gosh, I grew up watching or looking at your stuff. So that is the beauty of what we bring as cartoonists on these trips, and it is by far the most rewarding thing I've ever had a chance to do in my life.
Wow.
Well, Paul, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I know we could keep going. Maybe at some point we can do a part 2 to this.
But I could be boring for another hour. Just ask.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Please share with us where people can find you, your work, and anything else you want to share in terms of projects or events you have.
Yeah, sure. Probably the easiest way to get with me is just go to my website, which is paulcombsart.com. From there, it's kind of a conduit to where, all the work that I do, or fireengineering.com to see my fire service cartoons. I do 2 blog cartoons a month, and there's always the one in the magazine that gets published there too. So, and buy the magazine, please buy the magazine. Yeah,
old school.
No, old school.
Well, great. Paul, again, thank you. I had no idea that you were so diverse and so widely talented and of service in so many different ways. So I think, I know I'm inspired. I think anybody that hears this is going to be inspired. So thank you for sharing this with us today.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Remember to like and subscribe. Our YouTube channel is Responder Resilience. We're on Facebook, Responder Wellness Inc. and Responder TV. LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and go to our website, respondertv.com, for past episodes and guest information. Until the next time, stay safe, be kind to yourself, take care.